Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Six to Celebrate tour of Bayley Seton. For those of you who don't know, Six to Celebrate is a targeted citywide list of preservation priorities. The purpose of the program is to provide strategic resources to neighborhood groups to help them reach their preservation goals. The six selected groups receive HGC's hands-on help in all aspects of their efforts over the course of the year and continued support in the years to come. You can find out more information on the Six to Celebrate website, six2celebrate.org. Upcoming programming for HGC includes another Six to Celebrate tour, a physical in-person walking tour of Bushwick on March 26th, and our preservation conference on March 9th. You can learn more and register for both events at our website, hdc.org. If you have any questions about programming, you can contact me at marbulu@hdc.org. And I would like to thank the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, City Council, New York State Council on the Arts for supporting Six to Celebrate. And now I will hand it over to the Preservation League of Staten Island's president, John Kilcullen, to lead tonight's tour. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Welcome, everybody, friends and new friends. I'm John Kilcullen with the Preservation League of Staten Island. We're the only grassroots organization on Staten Island dedicated to preserving our built environment. So welcome to the Bayley Seton presentation, one of America's first public health hospitals then and now. And I want to thank HDC, historic preservation, since you're all here on a Tuesday night, is not easy. A lot of people don't see it. They say, why save old buildings? And David Goldfarb, who's on the call, knows this very well. Staten Island sometimes really has a tough road to get preservation achieved. So I'm going to continue going. All right. So again, just to go over the mission statement for the Preservation League is to preserve and advocate for preserving the diverse and significant historic built environment, cultural and natural landscapes. We've always included the built environment, but as the city grows and Staten Island loses a lot of green spaces, we partnered with other groups, Protectors of Pine Oaks, to really preserve that open space, which is Staten Island's history, important history. And we've been in promoting preservation since 1977, when it was founded by a group of preservationists concerned with how the loss of buildings on the island, particularly Snug Harbor, which I'm going to touch upon today, was one of their biggest achievements. So Bayley Seton campus, for those, I'm going to kind of give a framework as we go through. Dates to 1831. It was Staten Island's first public health facility, originally known as Seaman's Retreat. The building you see on the left is a designated New York City landmark, which is seriously threatened with demolition by neglect. The League has been active for many years trying to get landmarks to really step up, and those who work with the city knows that sometimes a difficult challenge. The site also contains the first public health services hospital done in the Mayan Revival-style, built in the 1930s, along with smaller contributing doctors, residents. The photo you see on the left is, sadly, you would not have been able to see this. There was a lot of ancillary buildings, including a wonderful nurses pavilion that actually flanked the corner of Bay and Vanderbilt, but was torn down. The site is occupied. It's kind of a split, owned by the Health and Bayley Seton Hospitals Corp. And the Salvation Army. So it makes, and two of the landmarks I'm going to discuss are each owned by separate owners. So I just wanted to go over the Native American presence on Staten Island has been long, as we know, as much as including much of New York City. So I just wanted to give acknowledgement that it was discovered, and I quoted that by Verrazano, then occupied by the Dutch and the English. Staten Island has always had a connection to its greatest natural resource, its waterfront and waterways. The local Lenape tribes plied its waterways from the Arthur Kill and Kilvan Cull tidal straits with their connections to inland rivers, the Passaic, the Raritan, to the English who occupied, the Dutch who controlled the Hudson River for many years, and then the English who occupied New York Harbor until the close of the Revolution. So the water that puts the island in Staten dominated its existence. And before I continue, I'd like to just acknowledge that Staten Island, including Bayley Seton campus and much of greater New York, were and are the ancestral homes of Lenape Munsee Native Americans. And this is from native.org. It's a great site that shows you the worldwide, the Native peoples in specific regions. So you can see Staten Island was the Munsee Lenape, the Mohican overlapped, and then the Canarsie, and moving out towards Long Island, names that you're familiar with today. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that. To put into a framework, island in the bay, head of the harbor, mouth of a river, Staten Island does them all. It's in the Raritan Bay, New York Harbor, the Narrows, and it's the mouth of the Hudson. The Hudson channels right through the Narrows daily with a great tidal flow. And as we all know, the Hudson River is tidal all the way up to Albany. So that has played historically into Staten Island's development. To put into context for those who are not familiar with Staten Island, hopefully everyone is and has been here many times or can come visit. Bayley Seton in the middle there, the Quarantine, which was here in Tompkinsville, Sailor Snug Harbor in New Brighton, and Fort Wadsworth at the mouth of the Narrows, all played into Staten Island's role in the metropolis. Again, the Narrows, many photos, illustrations have been done of the Narrows, showing the ships. It was the largest natural port in the world. And the bottom screen is the view you still see today from the other side, looking out from what would, if you were, this is right in front of the Seaman's Retreat. So you can see why it was selected. It had that wonderful view. And if you were a merchant marine or a seaman, you wouldn't want to go from living on the water for your whole life to an inland location. So this really suited that purpose. Sailor Snug Harbor was established by Captain Robert Randall, a Manhattan merchant, home for decrepit, and I just take a moment to make this smaller. For the aged and worn out sailors, it was 40 acres of Greek Revival dormitories. And this plays into, as we get to the Seaman's Retreat, how these individual institutions were all connected. And today, as bridges and tunnels and the disconnect from the waterfront, they're sometimes lost. It's over in New Brighton, Livingston, and it was started in the 1830s in the Greek Revival, flanking the Kilvan Cull. And it's a New York City landmark with other individual landmarks at the site. This is just a shot from the 1874 Beers map showing Sailor Snug Harbor. It was originally 164 acres, purchased by Robert Randall, and income generated from his property in Manhattan helped sustain it right through the 60s, when in about the early 70s or late 60s, it moved down to sea level New Jersey, North Carolina, where it still is. And this is where the members who became the Preservation League stepped up to save Sailor Snug Harbor from being demolished. It could have been just in the 70s, townhouses, and it would have altered the landscape of this particular neighborhood, but happily it's saved. Right here, and I'm in Tompkinsville on the North Shore of Staten Island, the Quarantine Hospital, as it was colloquially known, was officially called the New York Marine Hospital. It was built in 1799 on the island's northwest shore in the then town of Castleton. a short distance from the present-day Staten Island ferry. With the threat of yellow fever and smallpox and the closing of an earlier quarantine on Bedloes Island, now Liberty Island, they needed to establish a new quarantine. And again, Staten Island was chosen for its easy access, both the easy access and its connection to the waterfront, but it was also very rural at the time. Local residents were not happy from the start with this, to have such a contagious disease facility in their midst. Many efforts to relocate it to even less populated area on the island's southern shore were thwarted because no one really wanted this, and it stayed from the 1790s roughly through 1858. Let me just... So now this is just, I wanted to, there's so much information and it gets lost. This was William James Bennett, just showing the quarantine hospital on the North Shore. Some more from the Library of Congress. And as you can see, Staten Island's North Shore formed the third side of the harbor, excluding New Jersey for this purpose. You had New York, Brooklyn, Manhattan. There were ships plying the harbor all the time. So really, the location was a no-brainer, really, but mostly because the islands had very little population compared to those in Lower Manhattan at the time. So the residents were very upset with this. In 1858, in September, they made a plan and they succeeded in burning the facility down. So you can see, if I just go back, it was a very large facility, but the concern was people were coming and going. Even, quarantine was quote unquote there, but employees would come and go. The disease spread outside the grounds of the hospital. So that was burnt down. And while that was being burnt, so by the time there was a lot of just concern trying to keep the time frame, that was 1858. So roughly in 1830 is when the Seaman's Retreat was beginning. Here is the eastern shore showing Stapleton, Clifton. So to the top of the screen would have been the quarantine. And again, there were landings, many landings from the top, the first landing, third landing, which is just to the left of the lower star. The dark building is the Seaman's Retreat. And then the upper star, you can see, which I'll talk about, the physicians. And this was on the former Corson farm, and the state purchased it and began building the facility. So the campus was on the campus. 4 of the buildings I'm going to talk about: Seaman's Retreat, Physician in Chief's Residence, aka known as the Physician's House, the Mariners Family Asylum, which the Preservation League pushed, and we'll talk about that for landmarking and preservation, and the main hospital. Just wanted to, as I was putting this presentation together, and you see these things, but you don't think about them, and I was telling this to Michelle, Greek Revival, just to talk about Greek Revival architecture, it's all over, and it was a reinterpretation of ancient Grecan temple building style that flourished in the United States just after the War of 1812, which was a movement shunning all things English once again, many years after the end of the war had ended, revolutionary, and through the mid-1960s, when it went from municipal buildings to residential architecture. And it represented grandeur and ideals of democracy that, despite, as we all know, many bumps in the road, the United States sought to achieve as it became a growing nation. The first one, the Seaman's Retreat. at the corner of Bay and Vanderbilt. The first building, and I'm going to show some photos, was constructed in 1834 with the North Pavilion in 1848 and the South in 1853. The architect was Abraham P. Mabey. So the building was thankfully landmarked in 1985 for its real significance into American history. So I'm just going to take some highlight, if you just bear with me. So the funding came from a port tax that was levied on all ships and their seamen to provide this, because there was a great need in New York City for a place for recuperating seamen. If you can imagine, healthcare in the day was a far cry from what it was today. And then on top of that, if you're on a ship for many, many days at a time, your health is not, over the long term, is not going to be great. So they started to realize there was a need. This building is actually the third building that was constructed, and it was constructed, as I just mentioned, in 3 phases. So this is the original part, the middle part, and then the other 2 wings were added. So this is, you're looking at the north wing. The south wing is obviously to the left of the screen. And it was done I'm going to just read a little bit from the designation report. One of the things, Thomas Muffet, who was the physician in chief from 1854 to 1859, it kind of sums up, and that's why I included that slide. In 1862, another advantage of the waterfront location, quote, was the weary invalid can breathe the bracing air of the sea, the sight of his chosen element, covered with the white wing members of the worldwide commerce, fills his mind with gladsome hope and cheer. So again, they were able to see the world still go by and not feel like they had toiled for nothing. So they would enjoy the harbor views and breezes. Lawrence Christensen, an American who was painting in London. This was circa 1830s. So as you can see, he took some liberties. This is not what the building looked like, but it started with one center pavilion, and then later on the other pavilions were added. The building in the lower left is the original Corson farmhouse that was converted to a physician's residence, chief physician's residence. During the tuberculosis scare, this was a little bit later. As we all know, the thinking was tuberculosis was an air disease and a fresh air would cure it. This is the rear of the facility. So now this is sometime after 1858, because you can see on, now we're facing Brooklyn from behind. So the left-hand side is the north pavilion, and the right, obviously, is the south. And these are the tents that were set up. Another shot from the front. So, and just gonna, while this is a great photo, I'm just going to talk about very similar to the buildings built at Snug Harbor, but this building demonstrates a classicization approach to Greek revival, which is more eclectic, because as you can see, it doesn't have the dominant columns that Snug Harbor exhibited. But this building was more of a functional building, whereas the other one was dormitory, and there were more buildings at Snug Harbor. So the flanking building was built in three time periods with granite, with 8 bays on either side of the main pavilion. And one of the things, the use of the same material, I did not know this until I was researching. The building looks like it was built in at one time, but it actually wasn't. It is believed that this granite was locally quarried on Staten Island's North Shore, which is now called Granite Fill. And you'll see the physician's home is also built of the same material. So let me just use. Here's another one, a shot that really shows from a harbor. A little bit later, it shows the building that was in the painting, the original Corson farmhouse on the far left, the physician's house on the far right, and the main pavilion. And the Clifton train station is right in the front. So between ferries and trains, the site was very accessible. The main gate and fence still exists. They went right to the center. You just could walk up, from the ferry or the train station. There it is. It still stands. And this was at a time before landfill occurred. In the foreground, in the background, the current Staten Island Railway runs atop that embankment. But before that, this was the highest ground possible. And since then, they extended another 500 feet. And then many years later, there were piers, city piers were developed here. But this is that building in the lower right in the foreground. And again, another postcard shot from probably the early 1900s, still showing some tall masted ships. Again, there's the dock. So that building that I just referred to, the train station, was on your far left. So again, this site was fully integrated into the harbor. An interesting advertisement for this head tax, and this is readily available in public domain, and you can see what the tax was per voyage and per ship. Just really neat. This was from October 1st, 1880. So the facility had been open for many years at this point, and they really needed that money to support it. So now we're going to get into the history, and this is now the Preservation League, and when we reached out to include this as a Six to Celebrate, the league had been actively pushing hard with landmarks twofold. This wasn't getting the due justice it needed. This building is owned by the hospital's Bayley Seton Hospital Corp, and directly in front of it, the property boundary for the two tax lots is owned by the Salvation Army, which is the physician's house. As you can see, the building is being stripped of its copper. We've brought this up time and time again. Former executive director of the league, Barnett Shepard, well-respected scholar, had really talked about this is demolition by neglect at the highest degree. As you can see on the upper portico, the copper has been completely stripped, which is where it was accessible. And you can see it again, the windows. And these are all recent shots of this building. The one upside is that the granite is able to stay a wood structure, which Staten Island had many wood structures, and that's our biggest challenge. These wood structures start to fail and coverings go on them, vinyl siding, others, but the form of these buildings still remain the same, and the history of them doesn't change. But sometimes landmarks want purity, and it's been a difficult challenge sometimes. So this was as of last week. That main gate I was showing folks earlier in the vote, that's still there. We've pressed corporate counsel at LPC to talk with the current owners. So directly right in front of the scaffolding, that ends the property. So all the vacant property is the buildings that the Salvation Army took down that are connected, which I'll talk about with the 1930s development. And if you see this graffiti and breaking of the windows has happened in the last 3 years, sort of during COVID. There was as we all know, a crazy time. That graffiti is just running rampant. Despite their claims that the building is secure, it is not. The league has actually tried to work with Landmarks about connecting folks who could use this as an adaptive reuse site. The building is currently not used. The only thing it's used for, the campus, is for the Gotham TV series. And in the main building, there's a few health facilities, but it's by no means a fully operational site, both this and the other newer building. So the physician's in chief's residence, 1842. This was the building in 1985 when it was designated, again made of the granite sourced from Staten Island. And it was the fourth structure constructed. So you had, in addition to the existing structures, so the first was the middle pavilion, the second and third, the two flanking pavilions. And this was actually as a pendant. I mean, if you saw in the photo, to balance, and again, here's another image. The physician's house is on the right, and there is the original Corson farmhouse on the far left. This is it today. This was as of last week. Personal conversations with the Landmarks Commission, they assured us. So what prevented this being torn down during the Salvation Army's burn and clear initiative, there was supposed to be a Croc Center, which is a recreation center. It really didn't materialize. This was landmarked, and we had been pushing them, and we were told that a restorative architect was hired to start doing work, and they were going to spin this off. Nothing has happened. So it's boarded up, and this is what the front facing, this faces the harbor, as I've said, and this is what the public sees. So this contributes, and we've argued this many times, contributes to the lack of people wanting to landmark. They're not doing anything. This is what you're seeing. These are some more shots of the building. Just really, again, if it wasn't granite and solid, but still, it's not indestructible. Related to the site, James Boardman was one of the first physicians in the first chief physicians. When he retired, this Italianate style house built in 1848, he purchased for his family. He lived there through his death in 1898, and so he was the physician in residence, and he lived at on the campus from 1836 through 1844 in the previous building. He purchased this for his family. It's the Boardman Mitchell house, and Alvin Mitchell was a captain who was instrumental in saving. He received award money in 1894 for saving the lives of the passengers of a Cunard ship that was collided with another vessel in the Long Island Sound. And the Mitchell family lived there through the 60s. And this is a New York City landmark. It's a street-to-street Italianate style. For those, the Greek Revival is, indicated by the temple style and the columns, whereas Italianate are very high buildings with these eave windows and a lot of arches and bracketing. Another building just talking about the maritime connection is the Mariners Family Asylum, which was on Tompkins Avenue, which is just behind, and I'm just going to go back a second. I didn't put the map in again, so apologies. So here, you see my mouse, the asylum was right here. So it also had views. And this was for the women, the wives and children of the sailors who might have been deceased or infirmed at the Seaman Street, who had no other income. And these families had to live somewhere. So it was built in 1853. On the ground, trying to be full understanding there were dependents involved. So this is it from 1998. Thank you, HTC. This was a photo they had. So the Preservation League had pushed hard this Italianate. This was the building when it was built, just a wonderful building. But again, the alterations, it was calendared, decalendared by the Landmarks Commission, and the claim was it was too greatly altered. But the history is what we constantly have to push for here on Staten Island, despite alterations, which in some of the other boroughs, as folks know, happen a lot. And that was torn down in roughly 2010. The main hospital at 75 Vanderbilt, constructed between the times of 1933 and 1936. The architect was Louis Seaman. This was a work administration project, public works project, and a federal hospital operated by the United States Public Health Service. So the state operated the Seaman's Retreat until 1903, which the powers that be were convinced that it should be a federally operated hospital. And it was, and as it outgrew its site 30 years later, they were able to construct this, and it was the first public health hospital building on Staten Island for personnel of the Merchant Marine and Coast Guard. And it was built at a cost of over $2 million. And you can see the tawny colored brick, and it has a silver tower. It sits on 18 acres. And as I mentioned, Mr. Seaman was the supervising architect. This is the site, a very large, really double the size. I'm just trying to move my bar. So if you look over here is the Seaman's Retreat and its pavilions. And if you look, such a large, immense size, really serve at the time, servicing a growing city population. There were still ferries and trains operating. So it still had that connection to the greater metropolis and greater city. And this is a 1960s aerial shot. There's the tawny colored. Mayan style was a derivation of Art Deco, and it had recurring motifs on the pediment in the building. There's great Art Deco murals within the building. The Preservation League, with the support of our former councilwoman, have been pushing, just as a related note, after and what prompted this ongoing effort here at the Seaman's Retreat. Some of you may be familiar with the Backlog Initiative, where many buildings that were calendared but not landmarked, there were over hundreds of them in the 5 boroughs, that many on Staten Island. They were trying to get them taken off the calendared list and get them either landmarked or decalendared. In that time, the Seaman's Retreat was also fraying, and we were concerned about it, but we also asked that this building be landmarked. We had the support of the councilwoman, Debbie Rose. We've met with them, and this was at a time that after 2016, the backlog initiative was pushed through. Many buildings were landmarked, many were taken off, but since then, Staten Island still has had nada, any new landmarks, despite many buildings submitted for review, including many with the abolitionist movement and just a national history such as this building. So we're still concerned. We're stepping up our efforts this year. Wanted to highlight, just going back, when I was researching this, excuse me, it's in the designation report, but this really shows why this building was landmarked and the real significance, and to lose it. Joseph James Kinneon joined the Marine Hospital Service in 1886. This is him as a young man. And in a one-room laboratory in Staten Island, he applied new techniques that he learned. And this is from the National Institute of Health, which was what followed from this hygienic laboratory that he established. And he was the first to isolate the chloria bacteria, and then was able to come up with a cure for it through medication. And he served as director until 1899, and it laid the groundwork for the development of the National Institute of Health, which eventually moved down to Washington. So this is Dr. Kinneon in 1886. One of an interesting thing in researching this, these were all the officers. This was 1887. One of the current doctors at the National Institute, there was a YouTube video that was posted, and I never knew this, and folks here who are historians may know. Mr. Kinneon is on the far left. That little stick in his hand, he was an amateur photographer, and that was the shutter. So he actually took this photo. This was found out from his family later on. So I thought that was really neat. These are some of the officers that served at the retreat. And this is not the specific lab, but in the center pavilion is where the lab that he discovered the chloria bacteria. And this is from their archives. He is on the far left, second. He's on the far left, second in, and this is standing in front of the main pavilion in circa 1887. In researching him, I just thought this was kind of neat. This was his passport application, and if you look at the bottom, you'll see that, it lists his address because he didn't live anywhere else. U.S. Marine Health Service, Stapleton, Staten Island, New York. As a avid user of Ancestry, you can find a lot of good information. So kind of a neat thing. So it's just really neat, and we're actually going to be starting. He gets mentioned, but I don't think he gets real mention. So we're looking at doing a possible highlighting him more, along with some of the other folks that really, a lot of the health techniques were founded right here on Staten Island. So it's really neat. Right. I'm gonna try now. This gives I found this YouTube, my first time embedding a YouTube. This really shows, and I'm gonna start it. Oops. Now, hopefully, folks, this was a drone. Everyone's seeing that? Robin, just raise your hand. Do you see this? Yes, thank you, because that's all I can see. So this was a great, really, I think, wraps up the presentation. This was at the far left is the nurses, and I'm going to talk over it, and there's some music, but so there were buildings in front that they tore down. There's the Seaman's Retreat with the main hospital. This was in 2018 when the buildings were coming down, and it happened so fast. Any type of mobilization, just I just shake my head. So a nice view of the site, and you really see how large is. There's the Seaman's Retreat with the copper detailing, and then the 1930s building, much larger. And he's going to pan over. There's the doctor's building on the far right, and the nurses' pavilion on the far left. So where the pavement is in front of the Seaman's Retreat, that's the end of the the Bayley Seton Hospital Corp property. The rest of this, that's the nurses wing that was designed in the same style as the main building, actually flanked out. It was spectacular. They start to take it down just because they were doing the excuse me, they wanted to do a Kroc Center. Ray Kroc of McDonald's was building these facilities around the country. Sadly, the money fell through, and nothing has happened. So the league is just concerned that with that not happening, this is vacant land. We're just concerned that there might be an obstruction building something in front, that the Seaman's Retreat could get lost visually. And the building, why it was landmark, why it has significance, is its visual appeal, but they're separate tax lots. So it's something we're hoping to discuss with Landmarks Commission in a meeting in March. So you can see the detailing, the Mayan detailing that mimicked what was on the main building. He really did a great job, and I apologize. I don't know who the drone photographer is, but it really just, and I can send, this will be available so you can. And again, this building had been facing vandalism, but out of the box thinking, there had been talk about converting this to residential. It was a nurse's facility for many years. So again, you can see the Greek revival detailing. Again, the missing copper as I'm pointing. So I will stop that. I think we got a good sense on that. No, there's no screen here, but I just. Are folks seeing the PowerPoint again?
No.
You just, oh, there it is. You just see me. There we go.
There we go.
Thank you. So, all right. So I might have gone a little fast, but thank you for your attention. I know we have a little time for some questions and comments, and hopefully folks will have some that makes me able to answer them. And so we plan to also have a walking tour of the site of the neighborhood, so folks can see it and not just hear me. So do I have any questions? Thank you for staying. And I see David Goldfarb, a longtime member of the league and HCC. So if you have anything to add, David, please jump in. But does anybody have any questions? Again, thank you for listening.
Maybe you could talk about which buildings are you said one build, the doctor's residence was landmarked, but the other buildings are not?
So thank you for the question, David. So the Seaman's Retreat is, the physicians is both landmarked in 1985. As I said, John, we've talked with John Weiss at LPC Corporate Counsel to find out, and I was pressing him almost weekly, like what was happening, and he assured me that Salvation Army was working diligently to get a restorative architect to stabilize the building. Nothing has happened. So we had submitted, that was happening, but we also submitted when we lost the when we lost the nurses building and some of the other ancillary newer chief physicians houses, we pushed that they landmark that, and really been pushing adaptive reuse. Sadly, the Health and Hospital, Staten Island does not have a Health and Hospitals Corporation hospital. We have a couple of clinics, and you have a hospital that could easily be converted. I mean, it might need a lot of interior renovation, but as you can see, it's a large facility. So, and it's probably at 30% occupancy. So there's just random health and nonprofits utilizing it. While we have some time, I'm gonna
which buildings are on the National Register? Some of them.
The Seaman's Retreat and the Physicians. None of the other ones on there on the National Register. So, but it's a tag, we're concerned, and we brought this up. And for those who have been in preservation, you can't build. There's a real catch-22. Landmark structures, there's allowed for adaptive reuse, but you can't build in the front of a landmark property. So if your property is all in the front and the building has to be visible from the street, that dictates, the landmark law dictates that. But when the building like the Seaman's Retreat I call it separated at birth. The front, that main gate entrance, and I'll just show you, back up. Is everyone seeing the chart? Are we seeing the slides, please? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is one of the concerns is that this is the front of the landmark structure, but that driveway, which served that building, was separated. So where the scaffolding is, that ends the property, and everything behind the retreat is owned by the Bayley Seton Hospitals Corp. The physician's house, which is just to the left of the image, right of the image, is owned by Salvation Army. They're looking to spin that off as a separate tax lot so that they'll have, which now they have all vacant space for, I'm assuming, redevelopment. I have a pending meeting with Camilla Hanks, who is the new chair of the subcommittee for landmarks and concessions, a local resident and longtime supporter, as not in her capacity as councilwoman, but of local neighborhood preservation issues. We're just concerned that if you're looking at this building, you build something, that building is obstructed forever. And it's not even like it rises or it's on a street and you're building next to it or around it, or the things that happen in Manhattan and Brooklyn are skyscrapers go up behind it, which is fine. Here, the property is directly in front, and this building has you can't see it from Vanderbilt Avenue, which is to your left on the screen. So that's a concern that we're going to try to bring up with the site walk, a site visit of this particular location. Any other that's a good question, David. So we've just requested a meeting with the chair and the executive director to say, what's happening? You're not doing this. You're not doing right by this building, because it can't be vacant. And this was 4 years ago. We said, hey, how can we bring the Davids that want a building and the building owner together and say, hey, I'm looking for this great building. Locally, this has been talked about for a MERC, Maritime Education Center. It just seems to fall on deaf ears because we can't seem to connect the two, and it's just held up by the Hospitals Corp not wanting to do anything with it.
We have a few questions in the chat. One, someone asked, have you considered reaching out to the NIH for support from a historical perspective?
That's a very good question, whoever suggests that. In researching this, there is the NHS is still around, and I hadn't. And in the presentation that he talked about, Dr. Kinnean, he mentioned, oh, if it's still standing, this was where it was, and he had an image, a Earth view image. I don't know, they knew it was landmarked. So that was on my list to reach out to get them to say, hey, you know, they were, Dr. Kinnean is like royalty amongst the folks there. And here it isn't. And one of the things I was going to talk with you, Michelle, is to highlight this from a, street, letting people see on the street what had happened here. Because right now it's, I go back to this picture that's sitting here. This is a sad state to look at this building. I know a lot of our maritime, I know the Brooklyn Navy yard had similar, but they've been able to adapt to reuse a lot of the buildings, and it's become. So next question, I don't want to run out of time. Next question. Is there other questions, Michelle?
Yes. Someone said, can we start with preserving the fence, or does that make no sense?
Again, I love it. I want to, as we move forward, the fence at Snug Harbor is preserved. And we're not, and one of the things I say this, and David knows this, the Staten Island, Preservation League of Staten Island is not opposed to adaptive reuse. It's just that every time on Staten Island, it's all or nothing to the other degree. But that's a very good question. So thank you. Another one?
Tam expressed frustration with LPC as well and asked why it was so difficult, but I think you've kind of touched on that.
And and I say this, my frustration, David, we want to help them. They always have this wall, and they just never want to hear it. And we're always like, we want to help you. We were in the office, and Debbie Rose at the time said, yeah, how can my office help? They go, oh, well, we don't get into usage. And I turned to them and I said, we're not saying usage. We're saying just let them meet and figure out, like, we're not real estate agents. We're not going to get a commission. We just want to get this off the ground. And I know, David, David Goldfarb, you were at our anniversary when Barnett had brought that gentleman who wanted to use it as a incubator for technology. Do you remember we had it at St. Peter's on the the portico at St. Peter's Church? You might not have been there, but Barnett Shepard, the director of the league for many years, tried to bring there was a think tank. The gentleman, lots of tech money, wanted to make this his headquarters, and I don't know what happened, but he really got the ball rolling, and then since then nothing has really happened. And sadly, the only thing that the local papers show are abandoned buildings, and everyone loves seeing abandoned interiors. But got the inside, make it classroom space. One of the things we're bringing up is we need more classrooms on Staten Island, and a MERC, Maritime Education Resource Center, would be perfect for this site. Any more questions, Michelle?
Yep, just one more. Is the entire site off limits? Will there be a tour in the near future?
It is not off limits. I just like if I'm caught, I always will play dumb. You can go in; it's open. Sadly, the site, you know, it's falling apart, and I don't know what they're doing. But the site, whoever asked the question, it is open. You can actually street view it if you're curious. That's how I found that photo. I had some myself, but that photo of looking out towards the harbor was a capture, excuse me, from Street View. So you can do a virtual tour by just going to the corner of Bay and Vanderbilt. But we plan to do a walking tour. I've been working with HDC about the greater Stapleton, Clifton area. So we plan a walking tour as a complement to this. So you'll see it.
Yes, please do keep an eye on our emails and our website.
Yep.
We'll let you know. Also, I just wanted to note, you mentioned several other Six to Celebrate within the presentation, which makes sense. So if anyone is interested in learning more about the quarantine hospitals, we have information on our Staten Island Cemeteries brochure. And if you were interested in learning more about the items that were on the backlog that got either designated or removed, we have information about that in our Landmarks Under Consideration brochure. All of the brochures can be downloaded for free as PDF, or you can buy the year or by borough on the Six to Celebrate website.
And before I forget, if anybody wants to reach out to me for whatever reason, I can give you my email. I don't think it's there, but if you have questions, or I'm glad people that come on a virtual tour like this are people who are very interested and want to get involved or share similar interests. But it's jpkfhc@verizon.net. So it's jpkfhc@verizon.net, or you can reach me through HDC. But I want to thank everyone for these things. You put them together, and there's a lot of information here. But we're going to be working, like I said, with HDC since we were part of the Six to Celebrate, there was some funding, so we're going to try to see how we can tie that in to have some more street presence, as they say. So, no one has any other questions.
Thank you, John. I'm going to have to leave. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good to see you, David. Hi to Liz.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. So again, everyone is invited to come out to the island. We're trying, the preservation. Oh, before I forget, I'm going to do a little shout out. March 23rd, the league is leading, and I was going to mention this to you, Michelle. The league is leading a walking tour of Park Lane and the surrounding landscape. And this is we're partnering with Protectors of Pine Oak Woods. Park Lane is this little serpentine street that runs from the top of Grimes Hill to Stapleton, and just not far from the site here. And the property that surrounds the street is 9.5 acres that is owned by DCAS, Department of Citywide Administrative Services, that Protectors is trying to have transferred to parks, and it has great oak trees, and it's a nice, healthy woodland, and it's in an EJ community for folks who are familiar with environmental justice communities that this area doesn't have a lot of green space, more so down the hill, lower part of the hill. So that's March 23rd. We're going to lead this walk from the top, accessible by bus or quick walk from the ferry. So more to follow on that. And you can follow us on Facebook, and we're trying to get our Instagram back up, but you can follow Preservation League of Staten Island.
Right. Yeah. And if you send me anything, I can repost it.
Yep. So that was it. And just stay tuned, and we're going to have more as, we move forward with our conversations with our electeds and LPC, and I'll maybe see some of you at the conference in March as well.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, John. This was very, very nice. Great to finally get a Bayley Seton tour. And yes, we will let you know when we can get out there in person. Thankfully, huge snowstorm. We could still do this today. So love Zoom. But yes,
Excellent.
hopefully
So thank you all. And
thanks for a great tour.
Thank you, David. Good seeing you. Have a great week, everyone. We'll talk. Thank you, Robin. We'll talk. And for everyone else that I don't know, now that I know you, don't be strangers. All right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.